So in our last video, we talked about the background of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and the form and the conventions of the romance genre. And we ended with kind of an outline of the structure. So in this video, I'm going to go over Fitt 1. And before you ask, I'm going to tell you what a fit is in just a second. So I initially decided that I was going to do parts or fits 1 and 2 together, but instead I think I'm just going to go through each fit part by part, because I know myself and I know that I'll probably talk longer than I originally designed. So fit 1, and a fit is not like I'm having a hissy fit. It is simply it's a term from the medieval romance genre. So essentially a fit is a part. So in the beginning of our wonderful poem, we don't begin in Camelot, right? I know you guys are thinking I thought this was about King Arthur, and here we are beginning with the fall of Troy. So we begin not in England but in Rome. And there's a reason that that happens. Aeneas, according to medieval popular mythology, the Britons, B-R-I-T-O-N-S, the people that were a part of England before the Anglo-Saxon invasion, are descendants of Aeneas, the son of Priam, the king of Troy, and basically he breeds, according to the poem, a bold race of battle-happy men. And this mention of Rome in the beginning kind of gives a testament to British lineage and the Roman influence in England, because remember, Romans were there before the Anglo-Saxons. So here again we have that kind of historical allusion. And the allusion to the Trojan War also indicates, as the poet remarks, that these battle-happy men cause trouble and torment in turbulent times. That's a tongue twister. But all of that changes with King Arthur. If we look at line 25, the most regal of rulers, who is honored above all. So again, there's this time before Arthur and a time before Camelot that is chaotic, dark, and uncertain. And King Arthur changes all of that. And I want to draw your attention to the speaker or the poet's directive in line 30. And this, he says that this is an inspiring story that he intends to spin, one that has moved. Remember back to Dream of the Rude, when we had a speaker who said that his dream moved him. So we've got this idea of transformation or change. The story that he intends to spin is one that has moved the hearts of many. And if we look at line 30, he says, "So listen to my tale." And I want you to think back again to last week with our poems, and each of them did the same thing. We had speakers who told us to listen. So because of that, I want to focus on the function of medieval literature. And medieval poetry functioned in two ways. The first way was, of course, to entertain, and the second way was to teach. It's didactic in nature. So this poem does both. We can go through this poem knowing that we are supposed to learn something. So if we look at our setting in lines 37 through 59, we enter Camelot. And Camelot, we are to assume, and I want you guys to pay attention to this, that it is a place of civilization that has laws and rules and order that will be juxtaposed to the place Gawain goes to in part 2. And Camelot is King Arthur's court, and we get this rather lengthy description of the people of Camelot, the kingdom. This description, this use of superlatives, where there is a group of the most chivalrous and courteous knights known to Christendom, the most wonderful women to have walked in this world, the handsomest of kings, who's highly honored with no nobler knights, and a queen with the finest of eyes. So a beautiful queen, and all of these people of the kingdom celebrating Christmas and the New Year in this very decadent feast. So this opening sets the stage for a couple of things. We get the sense that this is a very young Arthur. He is boyish as opposed to the older Arthur of other stories. And it says that he won't eat until all are served and someone tells him a story. So again, it goes back to this idea of this is a very young Camelot, one that hasn't really earned its status as a place with the bravest of knights, with the noblest of people. But it also kind of sets us up for the idealized version of a kingdom and an idealized version of the people. Notice how the poet uses the superlatives in the description of the kingdom, and this is really an affirmation of the typical view of Camelot as a place of adventure and unparalleled bravery. But there, at the same token, we have some darker notes to the opening, where war has caused misery and distress, and this, I think, maybe is a criticism, perhaps, of military values, and this excessive praise of Camelot. I don't know. It's almost like we're supposed to question the genuineness of the poet's words, or at least consider that the greatness of Camelot, the greatness of Arthur, the greatness of Gawain throughout the poem, we should be weary of that reputation. So also in our setting, in addition to Camelot, we know that it takes place at Christmas time during the New Year. And I want you to pay attention to the kind of dualism or the tensions between the pagan and the Christian. Remember, I said this is a very Christian story told through a pagan plot. And I mean, what does Christmas symbolize? It's a symbol of birth, of renewal, of hope, of resolutions, of transformation. The birth of Christ happens at Christmas time. But there's also that kind of pagan tradition where we get the sense that there is the power in the idea of cycles. And this is a very cyclical story, and cycles play a big part of this narrative. The year, as in the cycle of the year, is an important cycle in both human and natural worlds for the pagan audience or for a pagan culture. It's kind of a limbo time of year where strange supernatural events occur. And even Arthur mentions this kind of limbo time in lines 470 when he says to Guinevere that the appearance of the Green Knight is keeping that such, it's fitting that such strangeness, the appearance of the Green Knight and the beheading game, should occur at Christmas time. And I also, if you also think about when Christmas happens, it happens in the winter, and in the winter things die, things end. But again, there's also that kind of element of new year, new life, transformation, and hope. So and that kind of goes back to the idea of the birth of Christ, who is a hope for humanity. So we get the entrance of the Green Knight, and it's very unexpected. And In some ways, the Green Knight can be seen as this otherworldly visitor to the human world, the strange force of nature entering Camelot, the epitome of civilization, the epitome of civilized society. And if you look at his description, it is a very lengthy description. It's, over 100 lines. He has a fearful form. He is a mountain man. He's handsome. And despite his size, he is built and finely formed. And amazement seized their minds, never seen a knight of such kind entirely emerald green. He is shoeless. His clothes are embroidered with birds and butterflies. He's described as this knight on a war horse, but he's not dressed for battle. He's not there to cause harm. And I'm going to talk more about the symbolism of the Green Knight when we get closer to the end when he reappears. But for all intents and purposes, the Green Knight is this kind of mythical representation of nature, where he emphasizes the significance of the year as a cycle of time, this idea of renewal and generation that are implicit in the Green Knight's immortality, since the beheading game really has no effect on him. And he really personifies this indestructible force of nature entering human society. But he's not just this kind of figure of terror and foreignness. He is a mixture of the familiar, the civil, and the foreign, or the wild, or the raw. He's opulently dressed like a nobleman would be, but his color and size indicate that he's not of this world. So essentially what we have here is this liminal figure mediating between civilization, or the civilized world of Camelot, this world of chivalry, and the unknown, unpredictable world of nature. Another indication of his kind of liminality is the fact that if I draw your attention to the fact that in one hand he has this holly branch, this twig of holly, and in the other hand he has a battle axe. And that is also a dual function. On one level, it indicates his civilized wish for peace, this non-threatening nature. Remember, he's barefoot, he's without armor, and that kind of peaceful, civilized nature is offset by his potential for destruction with the battle axe, as well as an understanding of the rules of society despite an innate link with the natural world. And I promise I will talk about the fact that he is green and that he is covered in green and gold, but I'm going to save that when I talk about the symbolism of the various different colors throughout the poem. So moving on, after we have this depiction and this entrance of this Green Knight, we find out his purpose. And the first, I want to talk really briefly about the first thing that he utters when he enters the kingdom. He says, "Who governs this gaggle?" And of course, a gaggle is a flock of geese, but there's also that informal definition of the word gaggle, which means this noise, this clamor. So essentially he's saying to Arthur, who is the king of all of this foolishness? And it's kind of condescending, and in some cases it's rude. It's very direct. And that's kind of the sense of his demeanor. And basically we find out he's there to look for Arthur, and he's not courteous or polite. And it's interesting because it shows that he is not of that place. So versus Arthur, who very graciously welcomes him and says to him, "Won't you slide from your saddle and stay a while? The business which brings you here we shall learn of later." So essentially he's saying, pull up a chair, get some food, and we'll take care of business later. And in some ways, that's very hospitable and courteous of Arthur, but it also shows it kind of shows his weakness as a leader, his immaturity as a leader, because he doesn't want to handle his business, so to speak. So why is the Green Knight there? Why does this big giant green man, I think of the Jolly Green Giant on the can of vegetables, why is he there? Well, we find out his purpose is to play a game or issue a challenge, one that kind of tests the bravery of Arthur's knights and in turn Arthur himself. And again, it goes back to his demeanor. Not only does he kind of criticize Arthur, he criticizes the knights as these bum-fluffed bairns or babies that he could defeat easily, but in the spirit of Christmas, he's basically feeling generous and wants to play a little bit of a game. And he issues this challenge. He says, "Who's brave enough to take my battle axe and chop at my neck?" with the understanding that in a year and one day he'll find me and I can do the same. So we have here this kind of introduction to the beheading game. And the beheading game, he kind of describes the challenge in the lines that I briefly, the brief synopsis I just gave you. And essentially the rules are the Green Knight offers his neck to a knight, and the knight gets one swing, and in a year and a day later the Green Knight gets to return that swing. And I want to draw your attention to the knight's response. And it's basically crickets. No one says anything, and I don't know if they're kind of off guard by his overall appearance, the insanity of this kind of challenge, or what. But because they say nothing, it shows, I mean, it's very unknightly. They're not brave. They're not quick to stand up and say, "Yes, I'll take this challenge head on," no pun intended. And the Green Knight essentially recognizes this and rebukes them when he says, "Here in the house of Arthur, whose virtues reverberate across the vast realms, where's this fortitude, fearlessness you're famous for, and the breathtaking bravery and the big mouth bragging? The towering reputation of the Round Tables, skittled and scuppered by a stranger. What a scandal! You flinch, and I've not raised a finger." And he laughs. And I want you guys to think back to a moment to the Wanderer and those hallmarks of wisdom, where one should not be hasty in speech. Don't boast if you can't back it up. So in a sense, Arthur's court has been called out for being foolish. They can't, as it would seem here, live up to their reputation. And we know from an Anglo-Saxon background that reputation is everything. And this causes Arthur to lose his mind a little bit and get red with anger, and he volunteers himself that no warrior worth his salt would be worried by his words. But the irony is that they are. Arthur is ashamed and angered that his knights won't stand up to fight this or take on this challenge, but he's also ashamed and angered by the words of the knight for having the nerve to point it out. And then we have I mean, it's like, what the heck? My knights can't take on this challenge. So then we have Gawain come into the picture, and he actually accepts. And I know that I'm running on short on time, but I'm going to keep going. So we have here our main hero, and he's only mentioned previously very briefly as being sat beside Guinevere. And in his speech, he's very courteous, he's very generous, and he says if he can leave the table and stand next to Arthur, without offending anyone. And he says, I find it as unfitting as my fellow knights would when a deed of such daring is dangled before us, that you, Arthur, should take on this trial, tempted as you are, when brave, bold men are seated before you, men never matched, men never beaten. So I'll come back to that. I am the weakest of your warriors, the feeblest of wit. Loss of my life would be less lamented were I not your nephew. My life would mean nothing. To be born of your blood is my body's only claim. Such a foolish affair is unfitting for a king. So first to come forward, it should fall to me. So what he's saying here is he's saying, nah, you can't take on this challenge. It's not your job. It is my job. I'm the knight, you're the king. Let me fight this battle for you. And so what can we really make of this speech? Well, we find out that he's related to Arthur, and there's really kind of two layers to this acceptance speech, so to speak. And part of it, he's very polite, he's very reverent, he's very deferential. He asks to speak. And he's self-effacing. He's saying, I'm the weakest of your warriors. I'm the feeblest. If I didn't have your blood running through my veins, I would be nothing. So my life is less worthy. It matters less than any of these other brave knights. So in one sense, he's self-effacing. He's got this kind of modesty, this humility. But in all reality, it's kind of a false modesty. In this speech, he is being proud. He is being boastful. He's basically saying, okay, I'm going to stand up where none of these other brave knights have, and I'm going to take on this challenge. You're my king. I got you. And then the other layer of it is I don't for a second believe that he thinks that he is the weakest, that he is the feeblest of wit. And I think he is very much bragging that he is Arthur's nephew. So what seems to be this kind of, oh, poor me, I'm going to sacrifice myself because I'm not worthy, it in all reality shows his immaturity. It kind of in some it presents him as this kind of braggart, but hidden in that speech, like I said, is a criticism to the other knights, and he's showing his pride. So we have in Gawain, our poet has set us up here, that Gawain is presented as a model knight, and he knows it. So moving on really quickly, we have his acceptance to play the game, and I won't go through all of that, but the Green Knight basically makes him promise and take this oath of following through. And I want you guys to note the words of truth and promise, the terms of the contract. And Gawain says, yes, on my name, on my honor, I will be struck in return in a year and a day, no matter what. And he says that Gawain says that there is knowledge he needs, including knowing the author, or not the author, the Green Knight's name. And the Green Knight says, I will tell you the truth once you've taken the blow. So we've got this kind of hidden underlayer that Gawain has to learn something. He needs knowledge, and that knowledge has to be learned through actions, through experience, through consequences of something that he does. The beheading, what happens, it's kind of weird and alarming. The Green Knight kneels, is beheaded. His head rolls across the floor. He's gushing from his neck. And he picks his head up by his hair and magically begins speaking without his head attached to his body. So it's very bizarre. I can't imagine. And his final words consist of a warning. He says, be wise enough to keep your word or forever be a coward. So he says that the Green Chapel Knight is who I am, and only a fool couldn't find me. And that's all the information. That's all Gawain is told. And then, of course, it's like nothing ever happened. After the Green Knight struts out, frivolity and gaiety begin again. Arthur says something to Guinevere like I mentioned before earlier. What? Strange stuff happens at Christmas time. Don't be so alarmed. What's the big deal? And the next thing you know, they're eating and drinking and dancing all over again. So what's up with that? That's kind of the opposite of the response that you would expect. And I think that ultimately this again is a sign of immaturity, of inexperience, of a court that hasn't been tested, that has kind of had the silver spoon and the honor of a reputation without really deserving it. And essentially, I don't know, I'm interested to see what you guys think, that this is kind of a criticism on the poet's part of the court and its values. So we're going to pick up here with part or Fitt 2. I promise I won't take as long. But it's important, and keep in mind as you read forward the description of Gawain, his journey, and some of the kind of themes that I've mentioned throughout here, like the exchange and colors and things like that. So I'm going to stop now and pick up with Fitt 2.